Welcome back. Have you come across Now This when scrolling on social media? It's a widely popular online source for video news, offering investigative reports, interviews, and original content. Within this platform, you'll find Now This Earth, which includes a series called Can It Save the Planet, focusing on the climate crisis, sustainability, biodiversity, and more. Alejandro Alba, Senior Correspondent for Now This, joins me to discuss the series. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Now, before we get into the series, can you tell us a little bit more about Now This Earth?
Sure thing. So it started during the pandemic. We had been covering environmental sustainability and climate issues, but this was a time for us to really dive in and provide our audience with, more solution oriented stories, human centric stories, and not just doom and gloom.
Right. Now, what inspired the series Can It Save the Planet? It already has like a really cool name. And I think it kind of like pulls people in because you're like, what is it? So can you just talk about this series and what inspired that?
I love hearing that it has a great name because, the process to get a name right, it takes a while. But like I said, we wanted to do something that was solution oriented and initially started as trying to look at solutions that were kind of on the fringe. So something a little unusual. The first one was how can edible insects save the planet? And slowly we started learning that even the solutions we thought we already knew, like solar and wind, they've developed so much over the last 20 years. So it was time to go back and see what's changed. And sure enough, there's some cool, unusual solutions based on those topics.
Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about some of those topics later on, but I think this is interesting just because as somebody who cares about the environment, or as much as I think I care about the environment, sometimes I'll do things and I'm wondering, I feel like I'm saving the planet, but I think it's cool to, watch something like this and find out, whether or not you're actually saving the planet. Now, I'm curious to know about, just your background. Have issues like this always been something that was important to you or that you wanted to explore a little bit more outside of work?
Yeah, it all kind of started. I mean, let's be honest. I'm a kid of immigrants, so sustainability, I feel like it's just in me. But this actual research and creating content or stories around these issues started in 2011, 2012. I was part of a research group that went to Indonesia, and I was focusing on environmental and ecotourism. So that kind of is what started. And then now, bit more than 10 years later, I'm fully in it, just even now covering the role that policy plays in climatic and environmental solutions.
Now, we talked about the name, and you kind of gave us a little bit of hint that there's a lot that goes into, that idea. Can you just talk about the process of making a series and taking it from something that's just an idea and then something that's a reality that people can actually watch?
Yeah, I mean, we were lucky to get a lot of support, not only from the Now This team, but also we had some sponsors that came in and they had initiatives or some sort of mission that aligned with our editorial vision. So it kind of came easy in the sense of, getting it off the ground. And in terms of finding the stories and the experts, I mean, that takes a little bit more time. But once we had the first batch, it was easier because we had other people seeing what we were doing and interested. So it was not only us reaching out to people, but some people also coming to us wanting to collaborate.
Now, before we get further into it, can you just talk about how often the series comes out and where people can actually view it?
Yeah, so YouTube is our main channel, but it's Now This, so our content is all over social media. But so the episodes come out in batches, so we call them, seasons, if you will. Right now, we are in the research phase to create our next season, but in the meantime, we are doing Can It Save the Planet shorts, and those will be popping up on our Now This Earth channel, so TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, now known as X, and YouTube, and Facebook, of course.
Now, I think when there's content like this, you have this interesting I like this thought where it's like, who's your audience, right? Because do you want to connect to people who already care about the planet? Or, is there a mission to connect to people who, don't think about this at all? Can you just talk about that thought process and, who did you want to encourage, or did you want to encourage people who don't care about the planet to watch this show?
That's a great question because most of our audience is younger. and they're already super passionate and not just passionate but hopeful for the future and these solutions. So that's we cater to that audience. But also, you said earlier that you think that you care so much about the planet, and sometimes you kind of wonder and question if you're doing the right thing or not. That was another kind of pathway that we wanted to go and address, the responsibility, the individual responsibility. We want to take the onus away from the individual and show them that it's not just them that have to do something. The movement has to come from the top down. So we know that big oil, we know that governments are responsible and accountable for a lot of these solutions. And so we wanted to show the people that might not be so well versed in these topics that it's not just about recycling your water bottle
Right.
or composting.
Right.
So you can go in that independent journey and be more sustainable, but at the same time, you could advocate and spread awareness about accountability and climate environmental responsibility for corporations.
Right. And I also want to add that like some of the small things that we do are like, plastic bags under the sink. For a long time I was like, we're doing the right thing because we're reusing these bags. And then later it came out like maybe that's not the best thing for a lot of communities to do. So I think stuff like this is just amazing. Another point that I want to talk about is the fact that you said a lot of your audience are people that are younger. And given the fact that your organization is so heavily used on social media, can you just talk about the importance of that? I know like when people think TikTok or, anything, there's always this negative connotation surrounding that it's just full of like nothingness. Can you just talk about, the importance and, how much social media has probably helped a show like this and your organization?
Yeah, I mean, social media is great. It's also awful, both can exist.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to generation and different generations and reaching out to them, I mean, we started on Facebook. And Facebook has grown so much into an older generation. We have Instagram, we have Twitter, and then we have Snapchat and TikTok. So we've actually been able to kind of gather different generations and have them consume our content. But it is important in terms of how quickly news can spread and information. There is a lot of disinformation and misinformation out there, but we make sure to break down and kind of cut through all that noise and make sure that you're getting the correct information. So then you can make your best educated decision.
Now, you mentioned connecting to so many different audiences, which I think is a challenge to do. And if that's something that you guys are doing, I think that just deserves like acknowledgement because it is hard to connect to older people and younger people with the same content. Do you think about that when you're actually creating like an episode? Do you think like, okay, for Facebook, we'll put this, and then for Snapchat, we'll put this? Or is it all the same thing and you try to hit on all the different points that people can probably connect to in that one episode?
Yeah, no, you have to think independently between each platform. So on TikTok, we consume information very different on TikTok than we do on YouTube. So on YouTube, it is a whole 10-minute episode where you could sit down, learn a little bit about the history, get a little tutorial, and then the conclusion of where we're going with climatic environmental solutions. If it cannot save the planet, why not? And we address those issues. Now on TikTok, it's quicker, right? And so sometimes we don't answer the question if it can't save the planet, but we post more questions so we could keep the conversation going. So we definitely think natively on the app, what will perform the best.
Now, you've covered topics from insects' nutritional value to harnessing the power of the wind. Can you explain how you and your team pick the topics you cover and what kind of research goes into selecting some of your guest speakers?
Yeah, those two were so fun, by the way, but we started thinking of just what's unusual in the environmental climate space. And from there, we kind of started seeing a lot more innovative technology solutions. So we started with that. But then we started learning about edible insects. We started learning about cloning corals, cloning trees. And it just kind of opened the doors to explore more. And when it comes to picking our experts, I mean, availability, let's be honest, is one, but also just the passion they have, and that passion translates on camera. And I think it's a little infectious, and that could inspire many other people to do something themselves.
And what was your experience like being a part of this? Like, were there things that you were surprised to learn, as somebody that's a part of this team? And possibly, like, what was your favorite episode to work on?
So favorite is hard to pick, but two do come up. Climbing a wind turbine was definitely up there. And also going to Antarctica to shadow a group of scientists that were doing whale research and trying to figure out their mating and migrating patterns and how the climate crisis is impacting just the way of living. Um, so those definitely are our top two.
Okay, and then what are some goals, or I guess some milestones that you hope to reach, just with this series and how far it could go?
Yeah, I mean, we there's no roof. I feel like there will continuously be new solutions, and even old solutions will have new developments, and we should go into it. Also, on interesting things that I've learned throughout the series, one of them one of them is carbon offsets and just how much of a not a scam, but there are so many loopholes within a system. And so I think the thing that I take away from all of this research is that there needs to be better policy on systems because there are so many ways that they fail communities. Recycling is another one. So I think it's just poking holes through everything and addressing those issues so we can have better solutions.
And as you mentioned earlier, it's not just like something one person can do. It really is a team effort. It's, an effort from people that are way higher than us that control more than, we can control. How do you convey this message without having the viewer feel overwhelmed or almost like, oh, what can I do? Like, this is just bigger than me. How do you convey that message and possibly offer hope that there is something that they could do?
Yeah, climate anxiety is very real, and we talk about it a lot. And so it's just not covering doom and gloom. I mean, we will cover climate disasters, we will cover the hard stuff because it's important. But at the same time, we should focus on the wins. And I think we always lean towards the negative, that we forget about the positive. Scientists even have gone on record saying that they're a little tired of just always hearing the negative and like not showcasing the positive. So we try to balance it. And at the same time, we try to humanize the news. There are a lot of statistics, a lot of data that come out there, and the headline says 97% of this is dead. Or, by 2023, this will happen.
Right. Or New York City's underwater.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're all based on truth, but
Right.
there's more to it. And there are humans involved and behind those headlines. And so we try to humanize the news, bring in the people that are impacted, and not only impacted, but have the environmental solutions to address these issues. And we put them front and center. We amplify what they have to say, and that brings naturally a sense of hope.
Right. And, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us to have this conversation. One, it's nice to speak to somebody who kind of has to kind of go through the same thing that we kind of go through when, looking for things to talk about and finding what's important and what we want to share with our audience. And this was definitely something, we wanted to share with an audience in the Bronx who is affected by a lot of the, stuff that's happening in the environment. So once again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
If you found this series interesting and would like to learn more about it, please go to the website www.nowthisnews.com and search Can It Save the Planet? Or you can also look for them on YouTube. Don't forget to follow them on social media at NowThis and NowThisEarth. We have to take a quick break, but we'll be back with more open right after this.